I took a job in the desert tower. We were not alone out here. They said the tower was abandoned for years, that no one lasted more than a week up there. But I needed the money, so I took the job. Now, something scratches at the metal hatch at night. Something that wasn't supposed to exist in this world, or any world. The tower was tall. Too tall for anything useful, in my opinion. A lone metal skeleton rising out of the Nevada desert like a rusting middle finger to God. When I first saw it, the horizon shimmered behind it like a mirage. Sunlight bounced off steel crossbeams. The air buzzed, not with insects, but with heat. Dry, angry heat that stuck to your throat. I'd never seen isolation this pure. No towns for 80 miles. No birds in the sky. No real roads. Just one dirt track that wound across cracked earth like a scar. The job offer had been vague, just like the man who gave it. Security detail. Communications tower. 2-week post. Triple rate. Cash. He didn't give a name. Just handed me a duffel with food, water, a pistol, and one instruction. Do not go below. That should have been a red flag. I arrived just before sundown. The tower cast a long, jagged shadow that stretched like a claw across the desert. The metal creaked in the breeze, shifting like it was alive. I could see the antenna jutting out at the top, fractured and useless, judging by the way it sparked faintly in the evening gloom. The living quarters were small. A prefab metal box bolted onto the mid-level platform, accessed by a rusted spiral staircase. Inside was a cot, a console of outdated monitors, a generator, and a logbook covered in sand and coffee stains. The previous entry was dated 3 years ago. March 17th, something moved in the sand again. Thought it was wind, but the sensors picked it up. Low-frequency rumbling. That wasn't thunder. Shut down sublevel. Lock the hatch. Stay above 30 feet at all times. That was all. The rest of the pages were blank. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was just paranoia. Maybe the last guy cracked from heat. Maybe he saw lizards or coyotes and freaked out. Maybe I would too. The night came fast and hard. The wind howled between the beams, moaning like it had lungs. I tried to sleep, but the metal groaned around me like a ship lost at sea. Then came the scratching. Not loud, subtle, like claws tapping lightly on the bottom hatch. The one bolted beneath the central pillar, the one I was told never to open. I sat upright, heart hammering. It was probably just metal shifting, I told myself. Maybe the wind blew sand against the lower deck. But then it stopped. And then it started again, slower, deliberate. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch. I didn't sleep that night. The second day passed in a blur of heat and silence. I checked the equipment. Half of it was busted. The rest flickered with strange readings. No cell signal. No GPS ping. But one thing caught my attention. A pressure sensor deep in the substructure, one that lit up every few hours with movement from below. I shut the console down. At dusk, I heard a voice. It was faint, carried on the wind. Help! I rushed to the edge of the platform and scanned the desert. Nothing. Just an endless stretch of tan and black. The voice came again. Help me down here, please. It was coming from beneath the tower. No one should be out here. No one could be out here. I grabbed the pistol from my duffel. It felt cold in my hand. I didn't even know if it was loaded. My fingers trembled as I descended the creaking staircase toward the midsection. The hatch at the base loomed ahead. It was locked tight with 3 steel bolts and a keypad. I didn't know the code. I didn't want to. The voice continued, pleading softly. It's dark. They took my skin. Let me out. Please, it hurts. My stomach turned. The words were human, but the tone wasn't. It was too calm, like something had practiced sounding scared, but didn't understand what fear really was. I backed away slowly and climbed back up to the living pod. The wind died after midnight, and then I heard the bolts turning. There was no wind. No one else out here. But I heard the bolts on the lower hatch begin to turn, one by one. I stared at the metal floor beneath me, hard in my throat. Something was unlocking itself. I grabbed the logbook again and flipped to the first page. It was a rough sketch of the tower, some notes scrawled beside it. Built in 1986. Originally for classified radio tests. One of 3 across U.S. desert lines. Shut down after incidents. Buried chamber beneath, unmapped. All files redacted. Possible entity containment? Don't. Go. Below. Then, beneath that, one final line, hastily scribbled. It's not in the tower. The tower was built to hold it, Ian. I slammed the book shut. Below me, the hatch creaked open. Something moved. Something that clicked when it walked and dragged something else behind it. I locked the cabin door. The wind began again, this time sounding like laughter. The human mind can endure many things, pain, hunger, loneliness. But isolation mixed with the unknown, that's where it breaks. That's where reason begins to rot. After that first night, I knew the tower was more than just a skeleton of steel in the sand. It was a cage, and something beneath me was rattling it, slowly testing the locks. Now, the hatch was open, and something was coming out. I spent the morning watching the monitors. Nothing showed on the external cameras, just dust and wind sweeping across the desert. But the internal sensors blinked red. Something had moved past the lower hatch, into the maintenance levels. I flipped to the old schematics in the logbook. The tower had several sublevels, storage, water tanks, power cells, but the lowest level Mark sub for was scratched out. There were no details, just a red inked X and one word scribbled beside it. Buried. The footsteps returned at 3:12 a.m. They didn't echo like boots or shoes. They clicked, like bones wrapped in wet leather. I turned off the lights in the cabin and waited. Heart pounding, gun in hand. There was no sound for a long time. Then the door handle turned. It stopped after half a rotation. Whoever, whatever, was on the other side wasn't trying to get in. It was checking. Then came the whisper. Just one word. Host. I didn't sleep again. When the sun rose, I forced myself down 2 levels to the electrical room. The main breaker panel looked untouched, but the cables behind it had been chewed. Not sliced, bitten. I followed the line of damage, flashlight trembling in my hand, until I reached a ventilation shaft. The metal was warped, clawed open from the inside. Something was moving through the tower's bones. I raced back up, locking every hatch I passed. By the 4th day, reality felt thin. Time slowed, stretched. I started hallucinating, or maybe I wasn't. I saw shapes standing outside in the heat. Unmoving figures, their eyes glowing faintly orange. Every time I blinked, they vanished. But the scratching never stopped. I rigged a motion detector in the hallway outside my cabin. It beeped every 23 minutes. Right on schedule. Whatever it was, it paced. Waited. Bided its time like it knew I had nowhere else to go. That night, I finally broke. I broadcasted a mayday across every open frequency on the radio. Civilian, military, emergency services. My voice cracked. I cried. I begged. I gave coordinates, tower specs, my name, blood type, everything. Static answered back. Until a voice replied. Not human. Not electronic. The desert doesn't give back what it takes. Then it laughed. At dawn, the logbook had a new entry. I hadn't written it. You're getting softer, just like the others. It won't be long now. Come below. We'll show you what you really are. I dropped the book and backed away. Something inside the room had written that. Or maybe I had, without knowing. I remembered blacking out for an hour, waking up with sand in my mouth and a nosebleed. Something was inside me, or trying to be. My reflection in the mirror looked thinner, pale, eyes bloodshot and sunken. I lifted my shirt. 3 thin marks ran down my rib cage like something had touched me while I slept. My body was changing, and I didn't know why. On the 5th night, I made a decision. I would go below, not because I wanted to, because I had to, because I felt pulled toward it, like gravity, but worse. Like something deep and ancient knew I was up here and had grown impatient. I took the pistol, a flashlight, one flare. The hatch was wide open. Below, the steel stairs descended into complete darkness. The walls were covered in symbols, old, burned in etchings that glowed faintly as I passed. They weren't in any language I recognized, but somehow I understood them. The door must remain shut. The host must not awaken. The bones beneath the sand must never speak again. I reached sub 4. The air was cold. Not desert cold, cave cold. A wet, breathing darkness surrounded me. The floor was made of bone. Real bone, fused into the steel. Ribs, skulls, jaws, some still twitching. In the center of the room stood a stone altar. It pulsed, faintly, and behind it, a figure. It wasn't human. Or maybe it was once. Its face was stretched long and thin, its eyes sunk deep like wells. It had no mouth, but spoke anyway. "Welcome, host." Then it moved. They say isolation makes you hear things, see things, believe things. But what if the silence isn't empty? What if it's listening, watching? What if the hallucinations aren't from the mind breaking, but from something breaking in? Because the thing that greeted me beneath the tower, it knew my name. It had always known it. I froze. The thing stood still, taller than any man, skeletal yet swollen in places. Its arms were too long, its joints wrong. It didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move, not like it should. It was like watching a glitch in reality. "Welcome, host," it said again without a mouth. The words vibrated in my skull, bypassing my ears. It didn't speak to me. It spoke through me. I raised the pistol and pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. I pulled again. The hammer fell. Still nothing. The thing took a single step forward. The sound of its movement echoed wetly, like raw meat slapping concrete. I stumbled back into the wall, nearly dropping the flashlight. Its beam passed over the altar again, and I saw it clearly this time. It wasn't a table. It was a cage, a lid sealed by dozens of rusted hooks and strips of ancient leather. Something squirmed underneath it, slowly, rhythmically, like breathing or dreaming. "It waits," the thing said, "but not forever." I bolted. The stairs twisted above me in impossible ways. I kept running upward, but the climb stretched longer than before, like the tower was fighting me, bending space to keep me close. By the time I reached the cabin again, I was drenched in sweat, gasping, covered in dust and blood I didn't remember shedding. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and cried. I awoke hours later to the sound of chanting. Faint, barely audible, but real. It echoed from the lower levels. A dozen voices humming in low, guttural unison. Not words, just sound. Ancient rhythmic sound. I pulled the logbook to me again, flipping desperately through pages. That's when I found the photo tucked inside. A black and white image, weathered and curled. It showed the tower under construction, surrounded by military trucks. But what struck me was what stood at the base. 3 men in hazmat suits, standing beside something being lowered underground. Something massive, clawed, and partially human. The back of the photo read, in faded ink, Project Warden, 1986. Do not unearth. That night, I stopped being scared of dying. I started being scared of what might wake up instead. Something changed on the 6th day. The air turned thick like walking through soup. The sky dimmed unnaturally even before dusk. The clouds didn't roll in. They formed above me, swirling tightly around the tower's tip like a drain being pulled in reverse. The wind stopped entirely, and then I heard my voice on the intercom. "Come below," it said. "It's almost time." I smashed the speaker, but it kept talking. "It chose you. It always chooses the broken ones, the lonely ones, the hollowed-out husks no one will miss." It was right. I hadn't spoken to my family in years. Had no friends left. No tais. Just debt and regret and miles of bad decisions. I was the perfect vessel. The thing in the dark knew that. At midnight I snapped. The chanting returned, louder, closer. I grabbed the flare and flashlight and headed back down, ignoring every instinct in my gut. I didn't care anymore. I wanted to see it. Needed to. Sub 4 greeted me like before. Cold, breathing, quiet. But the cage was open. The thing from before was gone. But its presence remained, thick in the air, oily on my skin. I stepped closer to the altar. Inside, something pulsed. It looked like a heart. Enormous. Covered in eyes that blinked out of sync. Every thump of it rattled the walls of my skull. I heard voices. "It's inside you now. You opened the door. You are the vessel." I stumbled back, but not before the heart saw me. All its eyes swiveled toward me at once, lids peeling open with wet cracks. Something shot from it, a tendril of shadow and flesh. It wrapped around my wrist, burning cold, and I saw everything. I saw men in the 80s trying to contain it, failing. I saw entire desert towns swallowed in a night. I saw ancient civilizations digging too deep and being erased. I saw the tower, not built to signal or study, but to seal. A cage, a tomb, but the lock had rusted, and I saw me, standing outside of myself, hollow-eyed, smiling. I woke up in the cabin again. My wrist was bruised, fingers numb. The radio was silent. The monitors were off, but one screen had changed. The thermal sensor pointed at the desert floor. Dozens of shapes, not people, things, crawling toward the tower from every direction. The last line in the logbook appeared as if written fresh, the ink still wet. "The heart is awake, and now it wants out." I looked out the window. The ground below writhed like a pit of worms. They were climbing. They were here. And I was smiling. The desert doesn't just take your body. It takes your mind, your memories, your sense of self. And when something older than death is clawing its way up from beneath you, you start to wonder, was I ever me to begin with? Or was I always meant to be it? The tower groaned. Not from the wind. There was no wind. The air outside hung heavy and unmoving, like thick velvet draped across the world. But the structure, steel and bolts and rust, trembled like it was afraid. And now, so was I. I watched the shapes on the thermal monitor inch closer. Not running, not even walking, just crawling, endlessly, steadily, like they had all the time in the world. They surrounded the base of the tower by dawn. Dozens of them. Human shapes, but stretched wrong. Limbs too long. Faces obscured by gauze or bone or nothing at all. Some dragged themselves by their arms. Others floated inches above the ground. They didn't try to break the door. They didn't scream or claw. They just waited, like the tower was a feeding trough, like I was already meat. I turned away from the monitors, ball in my throat. The walls of the control room had begun to change. They breathed, not quickly, just slow, steady expansions and contractions like the room itself had lungs. The wallpaper peeled in thick strips, revealing tissue beneath it, red, veiny, pulsing tissue. The logbook, the cursed, impossible logbook, was open again. A new entry had formed. The tower is not the cage. It is the beacon. That broke something in me. I screamed. Loud. Raw. and something screamed back from the stairwell. I locked the control room door. It wasn't enough. Whatever was climbing had entered the tower. I heard it, metal groaning, something wet dragging itself up the stairs. A rhythmic, slithering sound, as if bones scraped against steel. Then came the voices, hundreds of them, whispering just outside the walls. We were here before breath. You opened it. The tower is not a prison. It's a birth canal. I sat in the corner, gun in hand, counting my breaths. Somewhere below, the chanting returned. Louder now, more urgent. Like a countdown. I tried to send a distress signal. The satellite dish was down. Fried. Blackened like it had been struck by lightning. Even though the skies were clear. The radio hissed static, but then I heard my own voice. Again. It's not coming for you. It's coming through you. My knees gave out. I was going to die here. Or worse. I was going to become something that couldn't die. By day 7, time no longer moved in a straight line. Sunset and sunrise blurred together. The shadows inside the tower stretched and reached for me, even when I turned every light on. The hallway to the crew quarters had become a tunnel, far too long, impossibly dark. I stepped inside and nearly lost consciousness. Something was at the end of it, standing in flickering emergency light. It looked like me, but older, twisted, smiling. It pointed behind me. I turned, and the wall was covered in photographs. Dozens of them, all of me, different ages, different years, some in places I had never been. In one, I was saluting in a military uniform. In another, I was burning alive. In the last one, the freshest one, I was standing in this very tower, but my eyes were hollow, and my mouth was sewn shut. I ran. Back in the control room, the logbook was on fire, but it didn't burn. The pages turned on their own, each word written in something far too dark to be ink. I read the final entry aloud without meaning to. The vessel resists. The vessel remembers. The vessel must forget. And I did. I forgot my last name, my birthday, my parents' faces. I knew I was someone once, but that person had been peeled away like skin from bone. The only thing I remembered clearly was the thing waiting below. I knew it wanted me to go down, back to the base, back to the altar. I resisted for hours, maybe days. I don't remember, but the tower began to collapse inward. The walls pulsed. The floors cracked. The hallway became lined with mouths, open, silent, weeping, begging. I walked, step by step, downward. For had changed again. The altar was gone. In its place, a pit, a circular maw of meat and smoke and writhing symbols etched in flame. From within, I heard everything at once. Screams, laughter, my own memories, my own voice, and beneath it all, the heartbeat. Thump, thump, slower now, weaker, hungry. The heart needed a host. I stood at the edge and looked in, and I saw the truth. This tower, this cursed monolith, wasn't built to contain anything. It was built to feed something, and it wasn't the only one. There were others, around the world, hidden in deserts, under oceans, inside mountains. Towers, rigs, silos, all glowing, all waiting. I was just one link in a long, hungry chain. And now I was ready. The pit opened wide. The whispering ceased, and I took one step forward. When you fall into darkness, you expect silence. But down there, beneath the desert, beneath the tower, something was waiting. Something that remembers us before we were born. And when it opened its eyes, the world changed. I didn't hit the ground. The moment I stepped into the pit, gravity let go. I was falling, but not down. Not sideways. Not anywhere that made sense. Colors I'd never seen bled in my eyes. Sounds that felt like touch crawled down my spine. My name, my true name, echoed once and vanished like smoke. Then everything stopped. I stood on an expanse of black stone. The sky above was a churning ocean, inverted. Waves of red foam crashed silently across stars that blinked like eyes. And in front of me was the heart. Not a metaphor, not a hallucination. It hung in the void, towering, ancient. Veins like pipelines ran through it, pulsing with molten light. It didn't beat. It whispered, "You've come far, vessel. You are ready." I tried to speak, but I had no mouth. Instead, the thoughts formed in my mind, and the heart answered them like it had been inside me all along. What are you? The memory between moments. The breath before the first word. I'm not your God. I am your shape. Why me? You returned when others ran. You listened when others screamed. You did not break. You remembered. I was shown things then. Visions. Hundreds of other towers. In tundras. In forests. In cities hidden beneath the sea. Each with a watcher. Each chosen. Each broken and remade. And now it was my turn. Will you accept your shape? The heart asked. And in that instant, I understood. It didn't want my body. It wanted my memory, my story, my truth. It needed to exist through someone. The others who had vanished, Harper, Locke, even Lila, they weren't taken. They were rewritten, and now I could join them, or resist. But resistance had a price. I turned away, and the heart shook. The black stone cracked beneath me, veins of white fire cutting through the ground. You choose the wound. The sky bled. The stars collapsed inward. The ground vanished. And suddenly, I was back. I awoke in the control room. Alone. Sunlight poured through the windows. The tower was silent. Normal. The computers beeped with benign alerts. Had it all been a dream? Then I saw the logbook. The cover was burned. The pages were blank. Except for one. A new entry. Written in my own handwriting. Containment successful. Heart dormant. Vessel retained shape. I stood, but my legs felt longer. My reflection in the darkened window looked the same, but my eyes. They glowed faintly red. The radio crackled to life. This is Central Command to Tower 9. We've lost contact with several other sites. You're the only one still transmitting. Do you copy? My lips moved on their own. Copy. This is Tower 9. Standing by. And that's when I knew. The heart hadn't failed. It had succeeded. I left the tower that day. Not in a truck. Not on foot. I just stepped into the light and became part of the sand, the wind, the echo. I walk now. Between stations. Between stories. Whispering into the ears of the next chosen soul, guiding them to their tower, their pit, their shape, because the desert is growing, and the world is full of beacons waiting to be lit. So if you ever find yourself offered a strange job in a place no map recognizes, if the pay seems too good, the location too remote, the radio signal too clean, ask yourself, who built the tower? And more importantly, what's climbing up from underneath? Because the curse isn't the structure. It's the story. And now, you've heard mine. Sleep tight.